everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I was sent a prototype copy of Sanctuary: The Keeper's Era by Tabula Games. This is a 1 to 2 player competitive, fast-paced hand management card game that takes less than 30 minutes to play. The game includes 6 decks of 6 different factions that all play differently, and each time you play, each player will choose a faction to play as. Elnirth, a dark fantasy world, has a powerful mystic energy flowing dangerously through it. To avoid a catastrophic event, the energy was split into 6 parts called essences. Sanctuaries are the only way to channel the power of the essences. Each player will impersonate a keeper who is attuned to the essence that rules a faction. Players fight each other to preserve their sanctuaries and win when they destroy all of their opponent's sanctuaries and become the only keeper able to shape the fate of Elnirth through their essence. The game map or battlefield is formed by placing 2 mats next to each other. The mats together will form a 4x4 grid. In my example here, these mats don't have the lines indicating this, but the final version will help with this organization. If I'm playing as the player on this side, then my back row is my defense positions, and the second row is my attack positions. Similarly, here is the opponent's attack row, and here is their defense row. Behind your mat, you will have your deck of cards, a hand of cards. At the beginning of the game, you'll start with 4 cards to draw from your deck to form your hand, and you will also form a discard pile next to your deck after using the cards and placing them here face up. You will have your champion area here, where your champion card is placed face up. If this card is ever destroyed, it will be placed back here face down, and at that point is considered removed from the game. I'll explain this card in further detail later. You will place your sanctuaries here, ordering them freely with 1 for every row. Now let's take a better look at these cards. You will have 4 types of cards: acolytes, champions, rituals, and sanctuaries. Sanctuaries are areas that channel energy. As they gain splendor, their powers will trigger and affect the entire battlefield. Destroying all enemy sanctuaries is the winning condition in the game, so defending your own might be a good idea as well. This left track on the sanctuary card is the damage that a sanctuary can withstand before collapsing. This right track is the splendor track. This is a turn-based counter, and when it reaches the top, their special ability will trigger that is listed on the bottom of the card, and this ability is activated for the rest of the game, or until it's destroyed. Acolytes are soldiers or creatures that are summoned to the battlefield to attack and defend. Many of them have their own special abilities. These cards all have a summoning cost listed on the top left. You will pay the indicated number of essence crystals to summon this unit onto the battlefield, but you will only be able to summon your units to your side of the battlefield. This area on the left indicates the unit's attack value, or how much harm it will cause an enemy or sanctuary. To the right is the health. This is the maximum amount of damage a unit can endure before being destroyed. On some cards on the bottom, there is a possibility that there's an icon. Each of these icons correspond with a subset of rules that you will need to learn or look up to reference. These rules are not lengthy, but will just add an added attribute to that unit. For example, if this zealous icon is shown, this unit will be deployed active instead of in a exhausted state. And if you look at the bottom of the card, it will state the card's special ability. Champions are the most powerful characters of each faction, so use them wisely. They also have similar layout to the acolytes, and both champions and acolytes are referred to as units. Lastly, rituals cause direct damage and disrupt enemy formation or allows you to trigger strategic advantage. They have a summoning cost listed on the top left and their ability in text on the bottom. Every single card will have a name and a faction icon shown as well for reference. So now you have a hand of 4. To put a card into play, you will need to pay the essence crystals required to summon it. After paying, you'll place it on the battlefield if it's a unit, and you'll place it sideways, indicating that it's exhausted, or you will resolve the effect if it's a ritual. Your champion card can be summoned at any time as long as you can pay the summoning cost and the card is still face up. You will then deploy the unit onto the map. When deploying units, you will need to obey their attributes listed on the bottom. For example, if it's the Fierce attribute, it can only be deployed on an attack position. If a card refers to the flanks of a card, it's referring to the closest slots to the left and right of that card. You are also able to replace your cards on the battlefield, but you will need to destroy the card in play and then replace it with another unit. When a card lets you move, you can change locations of a card, but it still needs to obey their restrictions from their attributes. Units and sanctuaries on the board will eventually get destroyed. A sanctuary is destroyed when its counter gets to 0. This usually isn't done in one round, but sometimes it takes a couple of rounds to do it. When a sanctuary is destroyed, then you will flip it over and its special effect won't be triggered anymore. Acolytes and champions are destroyed when they receive damage equal to or greater than their health value during a player's turn. When destroyed, they are removed from the battlefield and placed in their discard pile, but champions are returned to their spot and turned face down, representing that it's been removed from the game. Acolytes can also be destroyed by other effects in the game regardless of their health value, and at any time if a champion leaves the battlefield, it's considered destroyed. In this game, you will need to use your cards wisely and in the best way that you can, because if at any time at the beginning of your turn you have no cards left in your deck, then you must choose one of your sanctuaries to be destroyed automatically. You have 28 cards that forms your deck, and eventually you can mix cards from your collection to form your own deck that is not faction specific. Let's check out what each turn is like by going over the turn structure. Players will alternate turns, and a turn is made up of 4 phases. In the beginning of turn phase, the player will gain 2 essence crystals. If any cards state that they are triggered during the beginning of a turn phase, then perform that effect. Later, if cards are triggered during different phases, then perform those effects at that time. Some phases are further split up. When finding wording like, at the beginning of a blank phase, this means as soon as you enter that phase. Or at the end of blank phase, then you will resolve that at that point where you are done with that phase and moving to the next. The summoning phase is next. You will be summoning units, paying their cost, and deploying them on the battlefield. You can deploy units and cast rituals in any order. Units are summoned or exhausted, so they are turned to the side unless they have an attribute that allows them to be alive when summoned. The third phase is the attack phase. All units in the attack position try to damage the enemy sanctuaries on the corresponding lane. If a sanctuary is attacked while defenseless, reduce the counter by their damage value of the attacking unit. But if an enemy is shielded by an active unit in their defense position, then the attack is directed toward the unit instead. In this case, each unit inflicts damage on each other at the same time equal to their attack value. If the damage inflicted is equal to or higher to its health value, then the unit is destroyed. Once you've used your card for attack and it did not die, then you will turn the card to its side to show that it's exhausted. The last phase, the end of turn phase, you will reset any partial damage on units. All exhausted cards are turned vertically to become active again. All sanctuaries advance their splendor counter by 1. You can choose to discard any number of your cards, and then draw cards from your deck until you're back to your hand limit. Players play until a player destroys all of another player's sanctuaries, and at that point, that player is the winner. Alright, so Sanctuaries the Keeper's Era is a great 2-player card game. The magic in the game is all in the gameplay, as the game comes with pre-constructed faction decks to be used in the game, so no need to spend time finding and buying cards to construct the best deck. But after you have a collection of factions, you are allowed to mix those cards around to form your own specialized deck. So there is some fun in making your own deck if you enjoy that aspect in a game. Now the rules and the way of play is intuitive and easy to understand. You're not going to be reading the rulebook forever or figuring out how to play the game. But really, time will be spent by reading each card and figuring out how each card can be used for the best advantage. I found that the game is pretty fun to figure out right out of the box, as factions all work differently, and have their own abilities that make that faction unique. So right out of the box, you're playing each faction and learning their strengths and figuring out which one you like. Looks might not be everything that you need to be going off of. Really, what this game offers is a strategic card game that doesn't require additional purchasing of cards. The game's focus is on card management, as you will be collecting essence crystals to be used to summon units or cards each turn. There is no limits on how to use these crystals. Some can collect a whole bunch and use them at the precise moment that they want, while other players might slowly use them each turn by adding more and more units to the board slowly. The deck does form a little luck in what cards you draw in your hand, but the game mitigates this as much as possible by first, not allowing you to spend every single card in your hand at the beginning of the game. I mean, you only get 2 crystals each turn, so you can only do as much as essence crystals that you have. But really allowing you to unleash your most powerful card at any moment that you would like helps form a strategy, and you also know that the other player can do the same to you. Now, I think only time will tell how balanced these decks might be, as the game I've played isn't going to tell me too much about that. I also see that each deck is different, but haven't been able to quite figure out on the best way to play each of the factions. But again, the game is full of strategy, and with more time exploring each faction, I think it'll get better and better, and I assume more factions will be coming out as well. The game will turn this world into a world of battles to possess the essences and become the keeper of Elnirth. In Sanctuary, The Keeper's Era by Tabula Games. Again, this is Boardgame Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.